Hello everyone, welcome to another feature highlight for my mobile game Tribes. Today I'll be working on several things, including letting the player actually move around the map with zooming and panning of the camera, and getting a working mobile version with touch support. So let's begin. Last time we made this pretty hexagon landscape, but currently we don't have any way of moving our camera to experience all of it. So our first task is creating a couple of functions that lets us pan the camera and zoom in and out. So I opened the player controller and made a function called check movement input. This code basically takes the world position of the mouse in the current frame and the world position of the mouse in the last frame and find the difference between them. Then it applies this difference, or the delta, to the camera position, and this moves the camera the same amount as your cursor moved. Then I put this function in the update to make it check every frame, so now when I press play, I can move the camera. Great! I noticed that every time I dragged to move the camera, I was clicking tiles. And of course, this is not supposed to happen. So, I added a couple of checks to my click function. First, if I click for longer than 0.25 seconds, it is no longer considered a click, but a hold. And second, if I move the mouse while clicking, it is no longer a click, but a drag. So if one of these are true, we skip the rest of the click function. And this fixed the problem. I also added a simple check to see if we started our move while pressing a UI element, such as this button. And if we do, we don't want the camera to move, as the player is probably trying to interact with the UI and not move the camera. The event system has a function called isPointerOverGameObject that returns true if our mouse is over a UI element. So I simply check this when we start clicking, and if it's true, we won't move the camera. Yeah, that's better. Adding zoom was actually pretty easy as well. I just checked the input.mouse scroll delta and see if it's positive or negative. And then I zoom in or out by changing the camera's orthographic size. This works because my camera is an orthographic camera and not a perspective camera. I added this function to the update as well. Here you can see it in action. We can zoom in and out. Great! Now we have a simple but working camera movement system. I'll make it better and polish it later, but for now this works great. As this is going to be a mobile game, we of course need to add the touch support. This is very similar to the mouse input, but instead of using the mouse position, we need to use the touch position. The zooming is a bit more complicated on mobile, as we need to check if the player is using two fingers and pinching on the screen. To check if they are pinching, we get the distance between the two fingers, and if this distance changes, then the player is pinching, and we can zoom in or out based on if the distance is longer or shorter. We also need to add checks to see if we're on the PC or on a mobile device, so I can change between the different input methods. Now that we have some camera movement logic and touch support, we need to test it on an actual touch device to see if everything works as expected. So I connected my phone, switched to an Android build and tried building the game. And to my surprise, it worked first try. Unity, you impressed me. When the game loaded up on my phone, I could test the touch movement for real. It was working fine, but I noticed some small things I wanted to fix, such as the camera jumping when I touched the screen with two fingers, and some other small polishing features. I also noticed that the performance was pretty bad even though I didn't have a lot of content in the game. So to display the FPS I was getting, I added an FPS counter to the screen and made another build. On my PC, I was getting more than 400 FPS, so performance was definitely not an issue here. However, when I checked the phone version, it said 30 FPS. Yup, no wonder it feels slow. Apparently, Unity automatically locks the FPS on mobile to 30 FPS, but we can luckily bypass this pretty easily by just setting the target FPS to 60. And build. Yeah, that's a lot better. Smooth. After doing some research on mobile optimizations, I learned that Unity has something called mobile shaders for their materials, which are optimized for mobile. Currently, I was just using the standard shader, and I was planning on upgrading my materials and colors anyway, so why not try these fancy mobile shaders? There are several types of mobile shaders, and because my game does not require detailed and accurate shadows, I chose to go with the Unlit shader to save some extra performance. This, however, turned my whole scene completely white, but don't worry, this has a simple explanation. The Unlit shader does not calculate light directions or shadows or anything. It will just have a completely flat color, and because we have not applied a texture to our shader, this color will be white. This happens in Blender as well. If I change the shader to emission, which basically works the same as Unlit, we can clearly see how all the colors turn super flat and have no shading. I can, however, fake some shading by applying a slightly darker shade of my color to the sides of my meshes and some even darker shades in the areas I want the shadows. And voila, we have a model that uses an unlit shader but with shading. This gives me full control of the look of the game plus increased performance. Doesn't get better than that. So I updated all my models to use this new unlit shader and the new colors. And personally, I think this looks a lot better now. But feel free to comment your thoughts and if you think I should change anything. Now that my game looks better and performs better, I can start polishing the camera movement system. Currently, my zooming only zooms into the center of my screen and not towards the position I'm trying to zoom into. I fixed this by checking the position of my cursor before the zoom and after the zoom. Then I get the difference between those and I just move the camera by this distance. This made zooming feel a lot better. I also made the camera keep its velocity if the player lets go while moving the camera, so it continues to move smoothly in the same direction. This feels a lot smoother than having the camera stop immediately when you stop dragging. The last thing I did to polish the camera movement is to bounce the camera back towards the landscape if you move too far from the edge, and also make the camera bounce a bit if you're trying to zoom when you're already all the way zoomed in or all the way zoomed out. This gives the players some kind of user feedback even though what they're trying to do isn't possible. I also made sure that all these new polishing features worked on mobile, which it looks like it does. Awesome, now we have a working camera system for both PC and mobile, and some prettier colors. I hope you enjoyed this quick summary of the system. Remember to subscribe if you want to stay up to date with the development of the game. And if you enjoy my content, a like would bring a big smile to my face. Thanks a lot, catch you later.